Well, that's me, Jonathan at Fibonojji. Go ahead and tweet me. You can see that I have, I think it's what, 2 million followers? Oh, no, just 283. Love for you to follow me. You know, you're going to see all kinds of things on this channel. But I'm going to kind of talk to you about something on a spiritual basis right now. This is one of my favorite quotes. It says, "You will trust God to the degree that you know you are loved by Him." This is by Brennan Manning. He wrote a book called Ruthless Trust, and it's one of the best worst books I've ever read. It's called Ruthless Trust, and it's Brennan Manning, and it really comes down to this one quote. He says, "You will trust God to the degree that you know you are loved by Him." And in that book, he makes a really depressing, interesting, truthful, frustrating statement. He says, "You cannot generate trust." And if you think about that, there's a lot of talk about trusting God, and there's a lot of talk about, there's a lot of cheeseball stuff out there. We just got to trust God, and you can look at stuff like this, and you can say, hey, when God is silent, and I'm not trying to be negative towards that. Charles Stanley says, trusting God means looking beyond what we see to what God sees. There's all kinds of quotes on trust, but this is the one that I go back to. It says, "You will trust God to the degree you know you are loved by Him." And ultimately, when we talk about trusting God, trusting the universe, trusting something beyond ourselves, we really have to encounter the fact that we enter into a love story. And so that we could talk about trusting God, but we really have to look at, do we really, really, really believe that God loves us and He's going to take care of us and He's going to be who He says He is? And most of what you and I are going to go through as on our spiritual journey is going to come down to, what do we trust in, and what are we feeling? Are we trusting in something beyond God, or are we trusting God? And then ultimately, it becomes a love story. And then when I really start thinking about the my own spiritual path, it's an interesting path, and it's not something I'm going to go into with this video. But I want to be really, really clear about, sometimes trusting God is really, really hard, especially if you're from a background where you weren't loved well. And if you weren't loved well, then obviously trust is something that's going to be harder for you. Just like, for example, if you didn't receive a good diet growing up, well, then obviously you probably weren't the healthiest person because your diet was deficient. So if you weren't loved well, it's hard to trust, and it's hard to trust in things that are beyond you, or things you don't control in, that you don't have control of. So one of the things that I want to do is, I'm not going to solve all your trust issues, just like I'm not going to solve my own, but it is a journey. And part of learning to trust God, or trust the universe, or trust something higher than ourselves, is really to just go back to God's promises in the Bible. This is one. It's from the book of Hebrews. And it says here, and I like this because it says, "Let your character and moral disposition be free, blah, 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 blah." And it says, "For God Himself said," and I like it when He says that. When God says something, it says, "I will not in any way fail you, nor give you up, nor leave you without support. I will not, I will not, I will not in any degree leave you helpless, nor forsake you, nor let you down, or relax my hold on you, assuredly not." And I'm not a Hebrew scholar, but I've heard that in the Bible, when God says something three times, it's like a supersonic promise. It's sort of like if you were to say, "Really, really, really." In the Bible, one of the ways that God makes an emphasis is when He says it three times. Notice here He says it actually four times. He says, "I will not in any way fail you, nor give you up, nor leave you without support. I will not, I will not, I will not in any degree relax my hold on you, assuredly not." It says, "So we take comfort and are encouraged, and confidently and boldly say that the Lord is my helper, and I will not be seized with alarm. I will not fear. What can man do to me?" And sometimes, if you're like me, you've been a Christian for a lot of years. You sort of, the words that the biblical words are kind of old and tired, if you will, and a lot of times people don't like to admit that. But sometimes people don't resonate with the words. Sometimes they don't resonate with the Bible. Sometimes it takes a movie, or sometimes it takes a piece of art what is most important in your spiritual path is that you a just decide you want to trust God, and secondly, you learn the promises of God. And then sometimes when something doesn't resonate with you, you might want to go to something else. Like one thing that I've been doing lately is going to the Message Bible, and I've been reading, maybe like, for example, the book of James. It's just pound for pound one of the best books in the Bible, in my opinion. You can't go wrong with the book of James. It's a quick book to read. It's just literally chock full of good stuff. And this is, I'll kind of end on this note. It says, this is James, the first chapter of James, verses 5. It says, if any of you is deficient in wisdom, let him ask the giving God. And number one, I like that because it talks about being deficient in wisdom, because who isn't deficient in wisdom? It says, let him ask the giving God. And notice how it describes God as a giving God or an ungrudgingly God. My stepdad was probably one of the most selfish human beings I've ever met. And so a lot of my belief in God came from my stepdad and my dad. These adjectives don't describe my stepdad and my dad, but emotionally, I'm wired to relate to the heavenly God much like I did my earthly dad. Like my earthly father was not one. He was not a giving guy. And my stepfather was not a giving guy. So, for example, so because of that emotional background, it's really hard for me to trust the words like, I will not, I will not, I will not. But regardless what my background is, part of me trying to leave my background to go to something better is to just marinate on truth and let my mind, whether it's for 5 minutes or 10 minutes or a YouTube video for 10 minutes, to let my mind say, hey, listen, John, regardless where you've been, regardless what you've experienced, this is who God is. He's a giving God. He gives to everyone liberally. He's not a fault finder. And it says, hey, but just be careful when you do ask for him. You can't doubt. You can't hesitate. For if you do that, you're not. It says, let not anyone receive from the Lord who's going to doubt. It says, for truly, let not such a person imagine that he'll receive anything from God. I think it's interesting because this is a verse that literally says, this is how you don't receive from God. It says, let not such a person imagine that he will receive anything he asks for from the Lord. Well, so here it talks about that God's a giving God. It says that, but we're the missing link. We're the weakest link here. It says, only if we ask in faith, it must be with no wavering, no hesitating, no doubting. For one that wavers or doubts is like a billowing surge out of the sea that is blown hither and thither, tossed by the wind. So I looked this up in the Message Bible, and let me just read the same thing from a different perspective, and it talks about worrying their prayers. I want to go back to this. It says, if you don't know what you're doing, pray to the Father. This is the Message Bible. He loves to help. You'll get his help, and you won't be condescended when you're asked for it, or that's just, you're not going to be, it's not going to be a condescending attitude. It says, ask boldly, believing without a second thought. People who worry their prayers are like wind-whipped waves. I love that. It says, worry their prayers, because, for me, sometimes when I get stressed out, when I really get in that kind of bad place, my prayers tend to be just me worrying. My prayers are just worrying my prayers. And I love the fact that the Message Bible literally says, John, don't pray your worries, pray the promises of God. Like, turn these prayers around and literally say, God, I'm glad that you're a liberal, that you're a giving God. Or maybe you can go back to, John 15. It says, hey, God, it says, if you live in me and my words remain in you, that I could ask whatever that I will, and it shall be done for me, as long as your words remain in me. Or if you want to go back to Hebrews, find something in the Bible that resonates with you. You might want to just go to John 16 and just pray 26, but not in a worrying way, but in a thankful way, where like you could say something like this. You can say, God, I thank you that you're a comforter, you're a helper, you're an advocate. I thank you that, however you want to word it for you. The thing is, part of the journey is learning how to say, okay, I want to trust something other than myself. I have to trust something other than myself. So let me at least learn the promises of the word, and let me see if I can't. I'm looking to go back to Hebrews. Give me 1 second. You can see this is live, so because all I'm really talking about here is we have to trust something, and whenever we recognize that we don't trust God, or worse, we've trusted in something lesser than God, we have to go back to the words of God, declare His promises over our lives, and that's simply where faith begins for me. And so I'll leave you with this. It says, hey, for God Himself says, I will not in any way fail you or leave you without support. I will not in any degree leave you helpless nor forsake you or relax my hold on you. Assuredly not. So I hope in this little 10, 12-minute video, I hope I've said something that can help bring you into trusting God on some level. To be succinct, we're going to trust in something. That's just, humans are designed to trust in something. We're going to trust in the politics. We're going to trust in a job. We're going to trust in a spouse. We're going to trust in the legal system. We're going to trust in something. It's only honest to admit that we trust something. And then often when those somethings fail us, that's when we move to wanting to trust something better or trusting God. And then we enter into a love story that says, hey, I'm only going to trust God to the degree that I know I'm loved by Him. And there's a lot to that. So what's the first step? I mean, do we just kind of pretend? Do we just make our lives full of quotes? No. What I suggest is find something in the Bible that resonates with you. For example, maybe just literal promises of God's support. And then learning to pray, but not praying our problems, but praying the promises. Once we start praying the promises and just going back to the promises over and over and over, that's where I think we're going to find some success. Because when I look at my life, the times of my greatest spiritual, financial, what have you, were also times of deep meditation, deep intentionality. And I didn't worry my prayers. I didn't spend my prayers talking about the problem. Nope. I talked about the promises. And sometimes whenever I really need to get something, I'd write something down. Okay, 12 minutes, 13 minutes here. I hope I've said something that could benefit you in some way. Leave me your tweets if you have any questions, or if you have a question, I'd love to discuss it with you. Remember, let him ask the giving God to who gives to everyone liberally and ungrudgingly, without reproaching or fault finding, and it will be given to him. Hope you have a great